The story begins in a noble's mansion, where a blind boy named Kunan is surrounded by his loved ones, all of whom have sympathetic looks on their faces. Everyone has always told him that his eyes weren't capable of seeing, so he often wonders what it really means to see. His father explains to him that seeing means having the ability to perceive colors and shapes. Apparently, Kunan became blind because his eyes bear the hero's scar, a mark left by the famous knight, Hister Hulia. Having such a scar isn't ordinary, his father tells him, so Kunan should feel somewhat proud of it and not ashamed. Despite that, even the maids whisper among themselves, thinking it's still sad, and they can't help but feel bad for him. Kunan overhears them and wonders why they would feel sorry for someone just because that person cannot see. Later that day, his magic teacher arrives, and a maid walks him over to the study room. On the way, Kunan asks the maid whether it's even necessary for him to learn magic at all. The maid tells him that it would be a waste of his talent if he doesn't. He was born with a water crest, and being able to use magic is a huge skill, a mark of pride he should take seriously. Kunan, however, doesn't see the point. Even if he learns to use magic, he still won't be able to go anywhere without someone guiding him along the way. When they arrive at the study room, he is introduced to his magic teacher, Jenny, who says it will be an honor to teach him magic. Shortly after, they begin their lessons, and Kunan appears to be a natural. He successfully performs his first spell on the very first try, creating a ball of water. Since Kunan cannot see, he has no idea what the spell looks like. Jenny explains that he is currently using water magic to make a water ball about the size of an eyeball. Hearing those words suddenly gives Kunan an idea. If he gets good enough at magic, he might even be able to create new eyeballs with his powers, which would allow him to see. From that day forward, Kunan gives himself the hope that through magic, he may one day be able to see shapes and colors just like everyone else. One day, during lunch, for the first time ever, Kunan becomes curious about what ingredients are in his sandwich. The maid comes over and explains each one to him in detail. Cooking for him suddenly feels much more rewarding now that he is genuinely interested in the food itself. After lunch, his tutor, Flora, meets him to read a book and asks him what story he wants to hear today. Kunan answers that he wants to hear the story of the famous knight, Hister Hulia. Flora hesitates when she hears this because she knows that Hister is the knight somewhat responsible for Kunan's blindness. The maid notices her hesitation and gives her a thumbs up, telling her that it will be fine. Flora agrees, but she asks Kunan to let her know if the story is too disturbing. Kunan promises her that he won't mind, explaining that he is eager to learn all kinds of information. As Flora narrates the story, Kunan learns that a long time ago, there was a war between the heroes of the world and the Demon Lord. Hister, the nation's hero, finally defeated the Demon Lord, but lost an arm and a leg in the process during a fierce battle. Since that war, every now and then, descendants of hero are born missing something, like a limb, their eyesight, or some other body part. People call these children the reincarnation of the hero or the hero's scar. Despite hearing all this, Kunan quietly thinks to himself that it's all nonsense. He knows that this is his life, and what truly matters is his own magical power. He does not need to be defined by someone else's story or by legends of heroism. What he can do with his magic is what shapes his future, not the myths surrounding the hero's scar. He has firmly made up his mind that through the use of magic, he is going to learn how to master it properly and eventually create eyeballs for himself using magic. However, all of this intense magic training ends up being far too strenuous on his young body, and as a result, he collapses from overwhelming fatigue. Aiko quickly rushes over and takes him back inside, so he can rest and clear his head. After he eventually comes back to his senses, Kunan makes up his mind once again that he needs to improve both his knowledge and his stamina, because passing out after prolonged use of magic is completely unacceptable for someone aiming to achieve such an ambitious goal. He realizes that in order to keep using magic for long periods, he needs to strengthen his physical body as well. Aiko suggests that he begin sword practice to build muscle and endurance, and also increase his food intake to support his growing body. However, she explains that all of this needs to be done in careful phases rather than all at once, or else he could harm himself. With that plan in mind, Kunan begins his training under one of the best retired swordsmen in the country, Master Yuoro. Although the training is difficult and exhausting, Kunan is clearly making steady progress little by little. Eventually, it becomes time for his magic lesson, so Jenny arrives at the training area, and Master Yuoro steps away to give them space. Jenny walks up to Kunan and tells him that she is impressed to see that he has started sword fighting practice as well. Kunan confirms this and explains that he is going to need a huge amount of stamina if he wants to achieve his goal. Jenny has always known Kunan as a gloomy and quiet child, but now she can clearly see that something has changed. He no longer feels empty or lost, and instead has a strong motivation pushing him forward. They then begin their magic class, and Jenny asks Kunan to repeat the spell they practiced during the last lesson. Previously, Kunan was only able to cast a single single ball of water, but now he easily creates 6 or even 7 water balls at the same time. Jenny finds this completely unbelievable because she didn't teach him anything new, yet he managed to improve so dramatically on his own. Meanwhile, Princess Mirika, Kunan's fiancée, is scheduled to visit him that afternoon. She feels hesitant about the meeting because Kunan has always been far too gloomy for her liking. She understands that this political marriage is her duty as royalty, but she struggles to imagine spending the rest of her life with someone who feels so distant. However, when she arrives at the mansion, she immediately notices that something is different. Kunan has a new energy about him, and he even holds an engaging conversation with her. He shows her the water magic he has been practicing, and she finds it genuinely interesting. They end up spending the entire day together having a wonderful time. On the carriage ride back home, Mirika blushes as she thinks about him and finds herself eagerly waiting for the next time they meet. Kunan, on the other hand, realizes that he may have been taking Mirika for granted all this time. Because of that, he goes to meet Flora and asks her to teach him how to become a proper gentleman who will truly be worthy of Mirika. Later that night, Jenny reflects on Kunan's progress and can't ignore the fact that he was able to cast 7 water balls at the same time, something even she herself is incapable of doing. Kunan has clearly mastered elementary water magic, leaving her with very little left to teach him. Since she still needs to earn her pay, she decides to change her teaching approach. The next day during training, she suggests breaking water magic down into separate steps, such as producing the water, making it float, and maintaining the ball's shape. To demonstrate, she creates 2 water balls, one hot and one cold, and explains that controlling the state of magic is what separates beginner sorcerers from true professionals. Kunan decides to give the technique a proper try, so he pours some water into a cup using his magic. He then hands the cup to Aiko and asks her to taste it. After taking a sip, Aiko pauses for a moment before saying that the water strangely tastes like apples. Jenny tries her best not to show it on her face, but she is clearly irritated and frustrated that Kunan is once again mastering a skill almost immediately after she introduces it to him. That night, Kunan stays awake the entire time, constantly practicing and trying to fully master the technique Jenny taught him. He focuses deeply on visualizing apples in his mind, and while he is able to clearly recreate their shape and scent, he still cannot properly imagine their colors. This becomes a serious problem for him, because without being able to perceive color, he will never be able to create the eyeballs he desires. Even so, Kunan refuses to give up and vows to continue trying until he gets it right, no matter how long it takes. The next morning during breakfast, Kunan attempts his magic once again by forming a ball of water. As he carefully moves the floating water ball over the apples on the table, he suddenly stands up in shock. Aiko quickly asks him what happened, and Kunan excitedly explains that through his magic, he is now able to see colors. At first, Aiko doesn't believe him and thinks he might be imagining things, but Kunan proves it by confidently stating that there are 2 green apples and 3 red apples in the bowl. When she checks and realizes he is correct, she becomes overwhelmed with joy and gives him a tight hug to celebrate. Aiko immediately reports this incredible development to Kunan's father, explaining that Kunan can now use magic to see colors. She adds that the closer an object is and the clearer its shape, the more accurately he can identify its color simply by touching it. Aiko also mentions that this new ability allows Kunan to read books, since he can trace the ink on the pages and recognize the colors. Although he has not yet learned how to read letters properly, she is confident that he will eventually be able to do so. Kunan's father is thrilled upon hearing this news and feels deeply proud that his son is making such real and meaningful progress. The following day, Kunan attempts to surprise Jenny before she arrives by creating a massive red ball of water using his magic. However, just as he is concentrating, the rest of his family suddenly shows up, startling him badly. He loses his composure, causing the red water to burst and splash everywhere, completely covering both him and Aiko. Kunan ends up looking as though he is drenched in blood, which causes his mother to panic in terror and faint on the spot. Kunan has no idea why his mom just fainted, so Aiko explains that blood is red in color, so his mom just got a little spooked out. Kunan's father immediately scolds him for frightening his mother and punishes him by cutting off his allowance for 2 months. As for Aiko, he announces that her pay will be cut for 3 months. Since Aiko is entirely motivated by money, she faints the moment she hears this punishment. Meanwhile, Jenny watches the entire scene unfold from behind a nearby bush. As she observes everything, she realizes that Kunan is far more talented than she ever expected. With the speed of his growth, she comes to believe that he may one day earn the highest honor in the world, the title of Cerulean Sorcerer. A few days later, Kunan's father tells his older brother that he wants to send him to a school. Surprised, Ikshyo points out that his brother has never seen the outside world. Gurion agrees, saying that he wants him to ensure his little brother can adjust well in the real world. Hearing this, Ikshyo remembers a day from his own childhood when he was leading his brother outside to play. At the time, Kunan was feeling scared, so his brother offered to hold his hand the entire time. However, when he turned around to lead Kunan out, he tripped on the stairs and fell down. As the memory ends, Ikshyo keeps his own fears hidden and reassures his dad that he'll do his best for his brother. The next day, Aiko watches curiously as Kunan fiddles with a dish of water. He explains that he enhanced the container with magic to use it as a fun fortune-telling device. Aiko immediately asks Kunan to use the container to find her long-lost will to live, so he tells her that she's still in her prime. She then wonders if Kunan can find her future husband, so he reassures her that a pretty woman like her will have no shortage of suitors. Watching the two of them exchange silly banter, Flora can't help but wonder whether teaching Kunan how to joke around was really a good idea. Afterward, she sits down with him for a lesson. Watching her master joke around, she wonders if he'll become a shallow playboy if he goes down the funny route. However, she feels glad that he has changed so much since he's smiling much more often. After the lesson, Aiko takes Kunan outside the house to meet his dad. Feeling cold, Aiko asks Kunan to make some hot water balls. After creating the water balls, Kunan feels worried that his dad wants to see him so late. Aiko thinks he'll be fine since he hasn't done anything wrong to upset him, except for that blood incident a while back. Kunan reminds her that she was the one who pushed him to do it anyway, but he didn't mind since he enjoyed the experience. Sometime later, they arrive at the main estate, where the head butler, Balin, greets them. Then, Kunan's brother comes over and starts leading him and Aiko towards his dad's chambers. As they walk together, Kunan's brother wonders if he needs his help to move around. Kunan shakes his head, reminding him that he can sense his surroundings pretty well now. His brother nods, still feeling uneasy from the last time he took care of his brother. Soon, they enter a room where both of Kunan's parents are waiting for them. After Kunan and his brother go in, Aiko and Balan remain outside the room. Then, Gurion asks Kunan if he's interested in going to a real school. Kunan refuses, saying that he doesn't want to trouble others to take care of him all the time. After explaining that he's focusing on something important to him at home, Kunan wonders if it's a problem if he doesn't go to school. His dad explains that although noble children are required to attend school, he got special permission from the emperor to keep Kunan at home because of his disability. Kunan feels outraged since he smells nepotism, but Gurion reminds him to focus on the matter at hand. He then asks Kunan to reconsider his decision to stay home. However, Kunan avoids the question and instead asks his dad to restore his allowance. This angers Gurion, so he leaps into a bickering match with Kunan. Luckily, his wife reminds him of his actual goal, so he calms down. He then explains to Kunan that he needs to go to school for Mirika's sake. He reminds Kunan that any noble who doesn't fulfill their duty is shunned by society, so Mirika would get harassed by everyone if she were to marry an illiterate boy. Hearing this, Kunan reconsiders his decision and agrees to go to school. Since he feels upset about going through so much trouble, Gurion reassures Kunan that he only needs to attend the advancement exams held every year. He explains that Kunan only needs to visit the school 5 times for his exams in order to receive his graduation certificate, which makes the boy feel relieved. Ikshyo also reminds Kunan that he and Mirika are his seniors, so they can guide him through the school. Kunan's mother stands up, excited to get the right uniform for her son. As she calls Aiko and heads outside with her to get Kunan's measurements, Ikshyo follows her. Gurion stops him, warning that other nobles might bother Kunan and Mirika at school. Ikshyo understands this and promises to do his best to take care of his brother. The next day, Kunan tells Mirika that he's going to school. She smiles, happy to spend more time with her fiancé. Kunan admits that he's a bit scared of the new environment, so she promises to take good care of him. Kunan thanks her for the help, but thinks that they'll get into trouble with her jealous admirers. Mirika hesitates and acts like it won't be a problem, so Kunan wonders if she isn't popular at school. She quickly shakes her head, proudly admitting that 5 boys have expressed their interest in her. Kunan sighs, realizing that he needs to prepare himself to deal with some jealous teenagers. Later, he dresses up in his uniform to go to school. As Kunan heads out of the house to ride his carriage, Aiko starts fawning over him for his dashing looks. Kunan jokes with her about his good looks before getting inside the carriage. Before they leave, he uses his water spell to coat the carriage's tires in a cushioning gel. Finally, Kunan says goodbye to his family and heads out for the city. As they ride on the carriage, Ikshyo notes that the tires are running completely smooth on the rough terrain. Kunan explains that he designed the spell for a smooth ride since they could get back pain from all the bumps in the road. Feeling proud of his abilities, he wonders if he can get a job in the future as a magic serviceman. Ikshyo then asks if he's feeling nervous about school. Kunan shakes his head, saying that he has grown much stronger now. He thanks Ikshyo Ikyo for all the times he helped him and apologizes for burdening him with his condition. Kunon also tells Ikyo to stop worrying about the time he got injured under his watch. While Ikyo is surprised, Kunon tells him that he's now determined to keep moving no matter the hurdles that block his path. Ikyo smiles, happy that his brother has changed from his depressed past self. Suddenly, Kunon starts going further and further, saying that he'll even outlive the rest of the world just to properly enjoy his life. In the end, Ikyo wonders if the maid is behind the sudden change in his brother's personality. As they get closer to school, Ikyo gets surprised since Kunon can detect all the people nearby. Soon, they arrive outside the school's building, where Kunon steps out of the carriage. Mirika rushes over to greet her fiancé, who starts rambling on about how pretty she is. Mirika smiles and returns his banter, leaving Ikyo completely baffled. Mirika then turns around to lead Kunon inside, but he remains standing in his spot. While Mirika feels confused, Kunon pays attention to all the voices he's hearing from inside the building. Although he feels some pressure in facing so many people, this time, he feels confident that he can handle it. Once he's mentally prepared, Kunon reaches his hand out to Mirika. He asks her to escort him like a delicate girl, so she smiles and agrees. Meanwhile, in another part of the school, Kunon's special teacher, Cast, wonders why her new student hasn't arrived yet. Knowing that Kunon is the son of a marquess, she starts to question whether a teacher as inexperienced as herself is truly capable of instructing him. Cast then hears some girls around her gushing over a handsome new student. While she watches in shock, Kunon walks away with his fiancée. Cast quickly regains her bearings and catches up and introduces herself as his new teacher. Kunon returns her greeting like a girl, explaining that he's playing the part of a delicate lady. This completely stuns Cast, but the school bell rings and breaks her out of the awkward situation. Then, Mirika and Ikyo leave Kunon with his teacher and head off to their classes. After the two of them walk away, Cast thinks that she'll have her hands full with this weirdo student. Nearby, some students watch Kunon from a window. One of them points out that Kunon is blessed with a hero's scar, so the prince gets angered. Seeing his anger, the rest of Prince Lyle's lackeys quickly cover up their praises with fake insults. Then, the prince turns around and tells his group to follow him. Meanwhile, Cast gets ready to take Kunon's advancement exam in a private room. She asks Kunon if he knows the gist of it, so he nods. Cast explains that although exams are usually taken with long gaps in between, Kunon will get to attempt his exams in a shorter period. Kunon feels confused, so she reveals that his dad negotiated with the king to get a special exception for his son. Kunon then points out that his dad is actually close friends with the king. However, he can't help but feel guilty that his father had to rely on nepotism on his behalf. Kunon apologizes to Cast for pressuring the school for his sake, but she pretends to ignore it. However, he keeps going and starts complaining about the rampant corruption within noble society. Cast quietly hands Kunon the exam paper, trying to shift his focus to somewhere else. Kunon ignores it and keeps insulting his corrupt father, so Cast finally begs him to stop involving her with the politics of high society. A little while later, she takes Kunon's exam papers and sits alone to grade them. Since Kunon kept yapping about noble families, Cast expects his test answers to be horrible. However, as she actually checks his answers, she gets shocked to see that he got them all correct. Elsewhere, Kunon heads to the cafeteria to have lunch with Mirika. Suddenly, Prince Lyle and his group stop them. Lyle calls out to his sister, prompting her to nervously fuss with her clothes. Kunon wonders who stopped her and steps forward to confront Lyle. Behind them, Ikyo walks over, shocked to see a noble family member harassing his brother. Meanwhile, Lyle insults Kunon for getting engaged to his sister despite his disability. Although Mirika feels upset, she feels powerless to speak up against her elder brother. Kunon senses her discomfort, so he gets ready to punish Lyle. Before he can move, Ikyo steps in to mediate the situation. Unfortunately, Lyle gets angry and orders him to get out of the way. While Ikyo feels trapped, Kunon quietly uses his water spell to gather water from his surroundings. He then directs all of it toward Lyle's pants, making it look like he peed himself. Kunon then innocently points out that the prince has a wet spot on his pants, which shocks everyone. Lyle gets embarrassed and claims that he didn't do it, but he quickly leaves the area to clean himself up. After he leaves, Ikyo immediately realizes that Kunon played a prank on the prince. He asks his brother if he's the one who messed with Lyle, but Kunon acts like he doesn't know anything. Ikyo then sits down with Kunon and Mirika to have lunch. After they all get their food, Kunon asks Mirika who Lyle was. She explains that he's her older brother, so Kunon feels sad that he's too mean to her. Kunon thanks Ikyo for always being a kind sibling to him. Meanwhile, Ikyo feels terrified since Kunon just humiliated a royal prince in public. Mirika tells him to stop worrying about it, but Ikyo knows he'll get into trouble soon. Elsewhere, Lyle angrily stomps away, furious about the embarrassment he just went through. Meanwhile, Kunan is having lunch together with his group while they talk about what happened earlier. They all wonder why Lyle openly stood in front of them and didn't even try to hide his violent attitude. Mirika is the first to give her thoughts, presuming that Lyle most likely acted that way to keep her in check. She explains that Lyle is the 6th prince, while she herself is the 9th princess, which naturally places her below him in the royal hierarchy. However, Mirika continues by pointing out that since she is now engaged to Kunan, the situation has changed. Kunan bears the hero's scar and is also a highly capable sorcerer, so because of that, her standing in society has risen dramatically. On top of that, now that Kunan has officially made his debut into high society, both his status and Mirika's would naturally be considered higher than Lyle's. Hearing all of this, Kunan admits that it sounds way too complicated for him to fully understand. So Mirika simplifies it and says that all that really matters is that she's happy to be engaged to him. Kunan smiles and says that he's glad to hear that as well. Still, he mentions that it might be a good idea for him to go and apologize to Lyle, just to avoid future trouble. The moment he says that, both Ixio and Mirika immediately shut the idea down and tell him not to even think about doing something like that. Before long, time passes quickly and the day of Kunan's final exam arrives. Before heading out, he squeezes in one last short training session with Jenny. During the session, Kunan creates a ball of water and then smoothly transforms it into a solid ball of ice, shaped and sized like an apple. Seeing this, Jenny is genuinely impressed and comments on how far Kunan has come in such a short period of time. Later that afternoon, Kunan arrives at the academy and prepares himself for the final exam. He looks around at his surroundings and feels a bit excited, as the place truly looks and feels like a real school now. Professor Cast approaches him and wishes him good luck, though she adds that Kunan probably won't need it given how skilled he's become. Shortly after that, several other students gather around and ask Mirika to introduce her fiancé to them. With that cue, Kunan formally introduces himself as Mirika's fiancé and Ixio's little brother. He puts on a polite and charming demeanor, greeting them and saying that it's lovely to meet everyone. After seeing his behavior and hearing the way he speaks, the other students immediately form the impression that Kunan is a perfect gentleman. At the same time, Lyle is standing off to the side, staring out the window while quietly scheming and cooking up his next plan. His thoughts are interrupted when some of the other students call out to him and tell him to come to the classroom because the final exam is about to begin. Lyle arrogantly responds that he'll come whenever he feels like it. The others quickly remind him that the final exam will be conducted all at once, and if he doesn't show up now, he'll miss it. Lyle takes a look at the expressions on his classmates' faces and gets pissed off because he just realizes that these cowards can't say anything to his face and would rather talk behind his back instead. That realization only fuels his irritation even more, but just then, Kunan suddenly lights up with an excited expression, steps forward, and grabs Lyle's hands, formally introducing himself since he didn't really get the chance to do so properly the other day. Kunan grips Lyle's hand firmly and starts shaking it repeatedly with enthusiasm. Lyle immediately snaps back, reminding Kunan that he never gave him permission to speak to him, let alone touch his hand like that. Kunan quickly apologizes for being rude, but instead of backing off, he immediately starts showering Lyle with even more compliments. The non-stop praise slowly causes Lyle to blush despite himself. Everyone around them notices how flustered Lyle looks, and before long, the students start laughing, amused by the sight since they never imagined Lyle could react like that. Not long after that, everyone takes their seats and the final exam begins. It doesn't take much time before the exams are graded, and Professor Cass stands before the entire class to announce the results. She turns toward the board and draws a flower on it, signaling that the students have passed. The classroom erupts into cheers as the students congratulate one another on successfully passing their final exam. With the final exam completed, Kunan departs in his carriage while waving and bidding everyone farewell, saying that he hopes they'll cross paths again someday. When Kunan arrives back at the mansion, he immediately resumes his training with Jenny. She asks him to create a ball of water and then split it into 10 separate pieces. Kunan does exactly as instructed, but then he tells Jenny that he's been working on a small trick of his own. To demonstrate, he transforms one of the water balls into a bird, which flaps its wings and flies away. Jenny is left completely speechless by what she just witnessed. After a moment, she drops to her knees, realizing that there's almost nothing left that she can teach him anymore. Shortly afterward, the two of them sit down to enjoy some tea together. It's then that Jenny finally decides to be honest and tells Kunan the truth that she truly has nothing more to teach him. She explains that he has already mastered elementary magic, and once he starts learning more advanced spells, he will surpass her in no time. Jenny admits that this has been the case for a while now, which is why she kept coming up with different and seemingly random training exercises out of sheer desperation. Upon hearing this, Kunan immediately stands up in objection. He tells her that he was already aware of it, but those very exercises exercises were what helped him broaden his magical range. He firmly states that if it weren't for those exercises, he never would have come this far. Kunon asks Jenny if she's trying to quit because the pay is too low, and says that if that's really the case, he can simply tell his father to give her a raise. However, Jenny shakes her head and explains that it's actually the complete opposite. She says she finds it unbearable to keep receiving such generous pay when she no longer has a proper role to fulfill as his teacher. Jenny then walks over to Kunon and places her hands on his shoulders, looking straight at him as she tells him that she has truly reached her limit and doesn't have anything more she can teach him. Kunon immediately refuses to accept that. He tells her that he wants her to keep coming up with those small exercises, even if they're nothing more than tricks meant to deceive him. He says he doesn't mind being deceived at all if it means he can continue getting stronger. But Jenny simply looks Kunon directly in the eyes and firmly tells him that she can't do it anymore. After saying that, she turns around and takes her leave. As she walks back home, she reflects on all the incredible things Kunon has accomplished so far and starts to believe that he might truly have what it takes to become the cerulean sorcerer. That thought suddenly sparks a burst of motivation within her. She tells herself that if Kunon can do it, then so can she. She refuses to lose to her own student and realizes that it's still not too late for her to push herself further. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Aiko informs Kunon that Flora has also quit her position. Since Kunon has finished his curriculum and officially graduated from the school for noble children, her duties are complete as well. Kunon feels a bit saddened that he never got the chance to properly say goodbye to her, but the maid explains that Flora didn't say her farewells because she knew she would end up bursting into tears. Hearing that, Kunon decides that he'll send her a letter to properly thank her for everything she's done. Later that evening during dinner, Kunon tells his father, Arson, about what happened with Jenny and how she resigned from being his magic teacher. He explains that Jenny believed Kunon deserved an exceptionally talented magician as his instructor. As they think about this for a while, Ikcho suddenly recalls rumors about an extraordinary royal sorcerer who goes by the name Zionli. Kunon immediately says that he wants Zionli to be his new magic teacher. However, Arson suddenly speaks up and shuts the idea down, telling them that it won't be happening because it's simply impossible to invite a royal sorcerer to teach here. Apparently, royal sorcerers are extremely high profile in this kingdom and answer only to the king or members of the royal family. On top of that, they rarely leave the castle, which makes getting into contact with them extremely difficult. Hearing this, Kunon comes up with an idea. He plans to accompany his father when he visits the castle, intentionally get lost during the visit, and when one of the royal sorcerers comes to help him, he'll somehow convince them to take him on as an apprentice. However, Arson immediately shoots down the plan the moment he hears it. He tells Kunon that it's a really dumb idea with a success rate under 10% and says there's no way they'll go through with it, so Kunon should just forget about it. But after Kunon's mother gives Arson the puppy dog eyes, he immediately changes his mind and says he'll talk to the king about it to see what he can do. A couple of days later, a Grandmaster receives Kunon's formal request to be trained by a royal sorcerer. At first, the Grandmaster doesn't seem impressed by the request at all and is just about to toss it aside. But then, upon seeing that the request came from Kunon Gurion, the bearer of the hero scar, the Grandmaster pauses, clearly intrigued. The following day, Kunon travels by carriage alongside his father to attend a meeting with the Emperor. During the ride, Arson tells him that the Emperor is planning to choose a royal sorcerer to become Kunon's instructor. This makes Kunon wonder if his father had used his influence behind the scenes to make it happen. However, Arson clarifies that he did nothing of the sort, explaining instead that every royal sorcerer within the Imperial Palace became interested in Kunon on their own. Curious about how his son managed to draw the attention of such powerful figures, Arson asks him to explain. In response, Kunon demonstrates his abilities by creating a cat formed entirely from water. Arson is immediately sold at the sight of the cute cat and wonders if it's truly 100% water. Kunon confirms, explaining that he still needs to perfect the artificial cat's movement pattern to make it act more natural. Watching his dad pet the cat, Kunon wonders if he has a soft spot for them. He suggests getting a pet cat for their household, but Arson immediately gets defensive, saying that a cute cat would only distract him from his duties. Still, Kunon keeps pressing the matter, so Arson acts like all the cats running around would make trouble for his blind son. Kunon reminds him that he can see very well with magic now, so Arson finally reveals that he's not getting a cat because his wife is a dog person. Kunon understands his father's reservations, so he suggests keeping the cat outside the house to satisfy everyone's demands. Arson thinks about it and decides it might be worth a shot. After a while, they reach the Imperial Palace, where Princess Reisha greets them. Kunon casually returns her greeting, so Arson reminds him to be more polite with the princess. Realizing that she's his future sister-in-law, he greets the princess once more with more sincerity. She smiles and returns his greeting, thinking that Kunon seems just as amazing as Mirka described. Then, she notices the cat in Arsen's arms, prompting him to place it on the ground. However, before anything else can happen, Kunan dissolves it into water. While Reisha is surprised that the cat was a magical illusion, Arsen feels heartbroken that he lost his new pet before even giving it a name. This display of abilities makes Reisha reconsider her previous opinion, and she informs Arsen that she'll take him to the Black Tower. He nods and prepares to leave his son in her care, but wonders how Kunan will go back home. Kunan reassures Arsen that he can head home alone, so he nods and promises to send a carriage for him. Then, Kunan also reveals that he's planning to take Mirka on a date, surprising them with his boldness. Sometime later, Reisha leads Kunan inside the Imperial Palace. As they walk together, she tells Kunan to be alert for some new information. Thinking she's about to teach him some top-secret magic, Kunan gets excited. However, Reisha explains that she can't have such complicated discussions while walking somewhere. Instead, she reveals some history about the royal family. Reisha reminds Kunan that their nation has 7 princes and 10 princesses, and although the first prince is usually crowned ruler, their nation is special since it allows all siblings to compete for the throne. Kunan notes that it's still incredibly difficult to actually overrule the first prince. Reisha also agrees and reveals that she gave up the throne herself just so she could have a safe career as a sorcerer. As they continue to walk, they walk past a strange tower. As soon as Kunan sets his sight on the tower, he stops walking, feeling some incredible mana points radiating from it. Reisha continues forward, not noticing Kunan's discomfort. She turns around to tell him about Mirka's worries, but Kunan surprises her by catching up with magical ice skates. Seeing the cool magic, Reisha instantly forgets about her sisterly advice and asks Kunan to teach her how to skate as well. As he prepares to begin her lesson, she gives him one final warning not to associate himself with any royal faction to avoid getting into unnecessary power struggles. Reisha then quickly gets to business and starts learning how to skate. After some time, she turns into an ice skating pro and starts zooming around the palace's hallways. In the end, the palace staff gets concerned for her safety as Reisha barely manages to avoid bumping into other workers. In the end, the poor workers call over a knight called Dario, who finally ropes Reisha in. After catching them, he gives both Kunan and Reisha a lecture, so they finally admit their mistake. Elsewhere, Arsen notices the commotion caused by Kunan's stunt. He asks a guard what happened and spits his tea out after learning that his son was treating the palace's hallways as a skating rink. Sometime later, Kunan enters Lord Londamon's quarters, where he greets the Grand Royal Sorcerer. Kunan nervously greets him, feeling incredible pressure from his mana. Londamon gets interested in Kunan's water crest and inspects his right shoulder. He finds out that the mark is a 2-star, which leaves Kunan confused. Londamon explains that every magician can use one of 7 elements: fire, water, earth, wind, light, dark, and foul. The ability of a magician to use an element is classified into 5 ranks, from 1 to 5 stars. Kunan realizes that he's still the second weakest rank when it comes to real sorcerers. Reisha also informs him that she's a 2-star wind mage, so he realizes that Londamon must be of a higher rank. Londamon wonders how Kunan can tell his rank, so he explains that he judged it from his immense magic pressure. Kunan makes a guess that Londamon is a 3-star, but he learns that the old man is actually an impressive 4-star mage. Londamon notes that Kunan isn't too impressed by his strength, so the Kunan explains he doesn't even know what his rank signifies yet. Then, he asks Londamon if a sorcerer's rank limits the kind of magic they can use. Londamon explains that a sorcerer's rank only determines the total amount of mana they have, not the kind of spells they can use. After his explanation, he wonders if Kunan is ready to focus all his energy on learning more magic. Kunan nods, so Londamon gets excited for the days ahead of them. Afterward, he takes the kid to a ground where they're surrounded by all the royal mages. Londamon asks Kunan to display some of his impressive magic abilities, so Reisha excitedly tells him that Kunan truly lives up to his hype. As Londamon feels jealous of her, the other royal mages also get interested in Kunan's abilities. Kunan realizes that he might be able to join their ranks if he passes Londamon's test, so he decides to get serious. Then, Londamon calls over a magician called Victo. Victo walks up and uses a water spell to create dozens of water balls around him. While Kunan is amazed by all the balls arranged in such a neat formation, Londamon wonders if he can steal Victo's balls away from him. This reminds Kunan of a lesson he had with Flora, when she explained that not only can he create new water from mana, but he can also control existing water. Still, Kunan feels nervous about tampering with water created by another magician. He focuses his mind and uses his water spell to manipulate Victo's balls, but the skilled royal magician resists Kunan's mana. Still, Kunan remains determined to keep pushing. After putting all his effort into pulling Victo's balls, he manages to steal 2 of them before Londamon ends his exam. In the end, Kunan feels shocked that he could only pull 2 balls, and realizes realizes the depths of a royal sorcerer's true power. However, Londamond feels very impressed, and Victo also admits that he didn't think Kunan could steal a single one. Victo then asks Londamond if he can teach Kunan, but all of the other royal mages start screaming at him. Raisha reminds Victo that he recently broke up with his girlfriend, so an incompetent fool like him has no right to teach such a talented student. Watching all the royal mages argue to get Kunan, Londamond praises the young boy. Kunan wonders if he passed the exam, but Londamond asks him to entertain him a bit more. Soon, he starts bouncing on a water trampoline created with Kunan's genius methods, watching their leader enjoy himself. The jealous royal mages ask him for a turn. Londamond turns a blind eye to all his students and instead asks Kunan how he created the water cushion. Kunan explains that he created the trampoline using special stretchy water, so Raisha wonders if he could create a soft mattress out of it as well. Finally, Londamond stops riding the water trampoline, and Kunan tells him that he could create one that could take him all the way to the second floor in a single jump. Shocked, all of the royal mages ask to see his grand creation in action. However, Kunan refuses, explaining that he needs to visit Mirika for their date soon. Raisha then asks Kunan to make a water animals for her since he doesn't have the time for a bigger trampoline. She wonders if he can make artificial humans as well, so Kunan nods. He quickly makes a life-sized replica of his personal maid, whose realistic features surprise everyone. Since the maid puppet is created with water, the royal mages wonder if it can perform in human movements. Kunan admits that the first time he made his puppet fly, it wasn't a very pleasant experience. Still, the curious royal mages ask him to demonstrate, so he manipulates the maid puppet to fly around the palace. As the puppet floats around like a motionless ghost, the clueless palace staff gets terrified. After some time, they all find out the true culprits and give all the mages a proper chewing out. Afterward, all the royal mages start blaming each other for pushing Kunan. Kunan feels upset that he messed up 2 different times on the same day, so Londamond tells him to cheer up. He asks Kunan to show him some more tricks the next time they meet, before giving him the good news that he's accepted into the Royal Mage Academy. Surprised, Kunan celebrates his achievement, but gets worried that he'll be forced to side with a royal faction. Raisha reassures him that royal mages have nothing to do with internal power struggles, so he can put all his focus into learning magic. Then, Londamond asks Kunan if he has a goal to achieve by learning advanced magic. Kunan explains that he wants to create a working eyeball with his water magic, so all of the royal mages acknowledge his lofty ambitions. A little while later, Kunan's spirits get dampened as his father scolds him for creating such a mess in the palace. Raisha tries to protect Kunan by saying it was the royal mage's idea, but Arson still blames his son since he's responsible for carrying out all the spells. Hearing his father's rightful anger, Kunan admits he was in the wrong and apologizes for hurting the innocent staff. After that, he says his goodbyes to Arson, who heads back home in his carriage. Since Kunan is staying back at the palace, Raisha reminds him that he has a date with Mirika soon. Shocked, he realizes that he completely lost track of time. Since he's getting late, Raisha offers to transport him quickly with the assistance of her wind magic. Together, the two of them get on a giant bubble created with Kunan's magic, and Raisha lifts them into the air and propels them forward using her wind. In just a short while, they reach their destination. However, Raisha flubs the landing and makes them free fall to the ground. Luckily, Kunan's soft bubble cushions the fall, which prevents them from turning into meat pancakes. Soon enough, Dario finds the two of them collapsed on the ground, knowing they pulled off yet another reckless stunt. Meanwhile, Mirika fusses over which clothes to wear on her date with Kunan. Watching her so flustered over a boy, her maid wonders what kind of man Kunan is to make her lady's heart swoon. Meanwhile, Mirika paces back and forth in her room, anxious about her meeting with Kunan. Soon after, a few servants let the maid know that Kunan has come to the castle to escort their young lady. The maid goes to relay the message to Mirika, and the moment she hears that Kunan has arrived, Mirika immediately hurries off to meet him without saying a single word. After she steps outside the castle, Kunan greets her with a polite bow and wishes that the night sky looks pretty on their date night. He then offers to escort her to their carriage, so Mirika shyly takes his hand. After a little while, they reach a restaurant where Kunan and Mirika dine together. As the food arrives, Kunan offers a toast to his fiancée. Watching his gentlemanly behavior, Mirika's maid finally understands why her young lady adores him so much. Mirika asks Kunan about his experience at the Black Tower, so he reveals that all of the royal teachers treated him well. He also informs her that he passed the entrance test with flying colors and is expecting a suitable royal teacher to take him in. As Kunan goes on about his story, he sneaks in bits and pieces of sneaky compliments to Mirika as well. These compliments only keep rolling on as Kunan keeps going, making sure that Mirika never feels like she's getting sidelined. Watching nearby, Mirika's maid thinks that the young master's tastes are a bit strange, but she feels happy that her young lady likes him. Then, Kunan suddenly stops his frivolous jokes and gets serious. He apologizes to Mirka for only being able to give her a small dinner. However, Kunan declares that when they get married, he will make sure to spend every day with her as proof of his love. As Kunan's passionate declaration leaves even the maid flustered, Mirka looks forward to their future together. Although she acts dignified and composed at the restaurant, she throws a total girl fit after returning home. A few days later, Kunan is writing a letter when Aiko calls him outside. After going out, he uses a water spell to help her clean some sheets. Aiko feels happy that she can slack off at work, but Kunan reminds her that she just interrupted his important homework. However, she acts like she was just doing him a favor by making him leave the room and touch grass. Aiko tells Kunan that he needs to spend time outdoors to grow up healthy, so he gets into a complex about his short height. To comfort him, Aiko claims that she likes her master no matter his height. Kunan smiles and begins returning the favor, but he stops short to avoid complimenting a girl other than his fiancée. After a short while, both of them get done with all the clothes. Kunan asks Aiko if she got any letters for him, but she shakes her head. Kunan realizes that the Royal Academy still couldn't decide on a suitable teacher for him. Meanwhile, in the Black Tower, Victo calls out to a professor in his room. After receiving no response, he walks up to the room and enters without permission. Victo calls out to Professor Xian inside the room, who gets upset that he interrupted his sleep. Victo tries to explain that he didn't want to disturb him anyway, but the Grand Master is calling for Xian's presence. Hearing that the chief sorcerer has called him, Xian calms down and gets serious. A few days later, back in Kunan's mansion, he happily informs Aiko about his new teacher. She asks him which one he got, so Kunan explains that he got a guy called Xianli Fishroll. Hearing Xian's name, Aiko's eyes start glowing with excitement. Kunan also thinks it's a great opportunity to work with a talented guy, but Aiko has her sights set on Xian as his next wife. Surprised, Kunan wonders how she even knows him, so Aiko explains that Xian is a handsome man, most popular among women her age. She then asks her young master to put in a good word for her, but Kunan feels jealous about showing her off to another man. Unfortunately for him, Aiko cold-heartedly shrugs off his concerns and leaves to get dolled up for her fantasy man. Meanwhile, in Mirka's place, Reisha asks for her permission to leave the Black Tower. Mirka agrees to let her go out under the guise of using her protection, so Reisha heads out with her. As they walk together, Reisha's attention soon drifts off to Kunan. She feels upset that Xian got to be his teacher even though he didn't even appear during the test. Suddenly, both of them encounter two of Mirka's sisters, Evril and Ladelia. As Mirka greets the girls, they mock her, acting like she got lucky to be matched up with a talented sorcerer. Reisha steps in and reminds the girls it's none of their business, so both of them get angry. She then asks them to step out of the way, so the girls finally buckle under her pressure. After they leave, Reisha comforts Mirka, who thanks her for the help. Once Mirka feels better, Reisha goes back to fuming about Xian's good luck. Soon, Mirka goes out, where Xian is waiting for her in a carriage. Back at Kunan's mansion, he calmly sips tea in his backyard when Mirka sneakily pulls up in her own carriage. Kunan goes to see her, so Mirka wonders if he was surprised. He says that her presence is a welcome sight. Kunan starts rambling on and on about how happy he is to see her. This time, Xian cuts his yapping short after stepping out of the carriage. Feeling his teacher's oppressive aura, Kunan instantly sobers up and grows quiet. As Xian stands there, menacingly, Aiko's heart races 1,200 miles a minute while she tries to act all dignified. Meanwhile, Kunan observes how dense Xian's mana is and realizes that he might even be stronger than Landemont himself. Watching him stand there in silence, Mirka wonders if Kunan is okay. In reality, he continues internally fangirling over Xian. After realizing that everyone's watching him, Kunan apologizes for ignoring them and introduces himself to Xian. He then asks Xian if he can call him Professor Honey after the thick nature of his mana, but Xian coldly refuses. Kunan wonders what he should call his master, so Xian asks him to use his real name like a normal person. He also expresses his dislike towards Kunan's attitude and reveals that he's only here because he was forced to become his teacher. Kunan realizes that Xian must owe some kind of favor to the Grand Sorcerer, which led to him becoming his teacher. Kunan is surprised that Landemont would send the most powerful sorcerer in the academy for him, but Xian gets offended by his nickname for the old-timer. As things get heated, Dario steps out from the carriage to calm both of them down. Kunan greets Dario and thanks him for keeping him in check during his time with Reisha. Then, he focuses on Xian again and wonders if he's as handsome as the rumors describe him. Xian thinks it's only natural, but Kunan explains he was just making sure since he can't see. Hearing this, Xian thinks that the young boy is only making fun of him. Kunan denies it, so Xian wonders just what goes on inside. After some time, everyone gets seated at Kunan's backyard table. He thanks Mirka for bringing Xian over, but she confesses that she just sneaked a trip to meet him herself. Kunan starts flirting with Mirka again, but Xian interrupts him and reminds him that it's bad manners to be so bold in front of his teacher. He then asks Kunan to have a discussion about magic with him, so Dario realizes that he's about to cause trouble for him. First, Xion asks Kunan if he knows anything about compound spells. Kunan explains that normal magical spells are cast using circular mana molds. To create a compound spell, a magician must layer multiple magical circles over one another. Xion nods at his explanation and asks how many layers he has been able to create. Kunan shyly explains that he can only create 32 layered compound spells, thinking that the number is too low. However, Xion is surprised since he wasn't expecting him to be so proficient. He then reveals that he can create over 50 layered compound spells, which leaves Kunan completely impressed. Xion asks Kunan how he got over the first hurdle of 10 layers, so Kunan explains that he modified the spells on his own to bypass the bottleneck. Hearing this, Xion wonders how a kid can be talented enough to modify intricate magical spells like Play-Doh. He recalls his last discussion with Victo, who was incredibly jealous that he was getting Kunan as his student. Raisha had also confronted him in her rage, but Xion had no interest at the time since he was only following Londamon's orders. Seeing him in person, he finally realizes why all the teachers at the Black Tower were so interested in this kid. Instead of teasing Kunan further, he sincerely asks him to demonstrate his abilities. Kunan asks Xion to teach him the 50-layer spell first, but Xion tells him it's way out of his league at the moment. He tells the young boy to show him his best and begs him for his guidance, but Mirika thinks there's no way her fiancé would stoop so low. Just a second later, Kunan does exactly that and starts begging for Xion's guidance. He starts glazing his teacher and calls him every praise in the sun, thinking it's totally worth it if he gets to advance his magic. In the end, Xion gets creeped out by Kunan's shameless praises and tells him to quiet down. However, he gives in to Kunan's praise and decides to show off a bit of his abilities. Xion constructs a powerful earthen wall with his magic, challenging Kunan to break it as his first lesson. Kunan wonders how he can destroy such a powerful wall, so Xion tells him to create a waterbed for him while he watches. Kunan creates the soft bed, which instantly captures Xion with its softness. After lying on the waterbed for a few minutes, Xion enjoys its softness so much that he falls asleep. Meanwhile, Kunan feels out the earthen wall to check for any weaknesses in its structure. As he senses the wall's composition, he notes how durable Xion's structure is. After focusing on the wall, he realizes that Xion has created it by layering over 40 defensive magic circles to strengthen its protection. Suddenly, Kunan turns around to Mirika and sits down for some tea. He asks her to wait for Xion since he's confident he can destroy the wall in an instant. After a while, Xion wakes up on the comfy bed and realizes he wasted too much time. Kunan informs him that he slept for a whole 2 hours, so Xion gets up to inspect his progress. Seeing the earthen wall unharmed, he thinks that Kunan has given up on destroying it. However, Kunan asks him for permission to destroy the wall, so Xion nods curiously. Soon, Kunan uses the water spell he used to clean Ikka's laundry, which surrounds the earth wall with bubbles. Kunan explains that even though the wall is tough, it's made out of a substance similar to dirt, which becomes fragile once it absorbs enough water. Xion wonders why he chose the washing spell to break it, so Kunan explains it's simply easier to clean up. After his explanation, Xion approves of Kunan's methods. He notes that even though Kunan specializes in a different water spell, he chose the perfect method for his situation. Kunan hears this praise and thinks he is finally worthy to be his student, but Xion warns him not to get ahead of himself. In the end, he formally accepts Kunan as his student. Kunan gets ecstatic and starts celebrating his victory with Mirika, but Xion reminds him to pay attention to him. He informs Kunan that he'll teach him a million new spells and have him help out with his research, which will help him rise through the ranks as a pro sorcerer. However, he points out that this will leave Mirika behind since Kunan's status will soon surpass hers. He asks Mirika what she plans to do next, so the princess falls into thought. Knowing Xion is right, she wonders if she'll ever be worthy of being Kunan's wife. Luckily, Kunan steps in and asks Xion to stop bullying his fiancée. He points out that Xion loves bullying girls because he's too awkward around them, which hits a sore spot. He then doubles down and claims that Xion is the type of guy to lose his girl because he's too shy to admit his feelings, which finally takes Xion's focus away from Mirika. Later at night, Mirika stays up in her room, deciding to take action for the sake of her future with Kunan. The next day, Xinon returns to Kunan's house with a smug face. Kunan happily greets his master, filled with respect for his incredible skill and teaching talent. Xinon warns Kunan that he won't hold back at all during their lessons, but Kunan reassures him that his body is ready. He requests his master to give him his hardest lessons, excited to practice the most complicated magical skills under the guidance of an expert wizard like him. However, a few hours later, Kunan simply ends up as a human printer, creating copies of magic techniques for his master. He asks Xinon Zenon if he stopped loving him, but Zenon reminds him that he never loved him at all. He then reveals that the documents he's working on are state secrets, so nobody else is allowed to see them. After kicking everyone out of the room with this excuse, Zenon shyly asks Kunon to make him a water bubble mattress. As he happily snoozes away on the soft bed, Kunon gets to work on the documents. Meanwhile, Aiko offers to prepare some tea for Mirika, and in return, Mirika asks the maid to assist her with her swordsmanship training. Mirika explains that she recently started swordsmanship, so she needs a partner to practice her moves with. She then warns Aiko to keep her training a secret from Kunon before leaving to spar with Dario. As they exchange blows, Dario knocks out Mirika's sword from her hand. However, she picks it back up, determined to keep going and become a better partner for Kunon. Meanwhile, back in Kunon's room, he finds a strange diagram among Zenon's documents. While he wonders what the diagram represents, Zenon wakes up and asks if he's finished with the work. Kunon responds that he's only halfway done, so Zenon mocks him for being so slow. Kunon refuses to take the unnecessary criticism and points out that Zenon's handwriting is hard to read because it looks like he dipped an earthworm in ink to write it. Zenon shamelessly refuses to take the blame, so Kunon tells him that he'll start charging money for his tedious work. Finally, Zenon reminds him that copying the magical texts is also a part of his training, so he should stop complaining. He reminds Kunon that if he kept reading spells from clean books, it would never help him retain the information as effectively as analyzing it and writing it down by himself. Hearing this, Kunon admits that Zenon is wise and thanks him for the lesson. Afterward, Zenon starts leaving for the Black Tower, so Kunon asks him about the strange diagram he saw. Zenon thinks about it for a bit before saying that he'll demonstrate in person during their next lesson. Since the next lesson will be at the Black Tower, Kunon feels happy that he'll get to see Mirika there again, but Zenon reminds him to stay focused. A few days later, Kunon visits the tower for his next lesson. There, all the other royal mages surround him, but Zenon proudly approaches them to assert his dominance. He reminds everyone that Kunon is his student and takes him away to a certain room. At once, all the sorcerers try to stop them, so Zenon orders Kunon to knock them out with his water mattresses. Once everyone is asleep on the fluffy beds, they head inside to begin their magic lesson. As Kunon and Zenon walk together, Zenon asks his student if he knows about magic tools. Kunon says that magic tools are devices operated using a sorcerer's power, so Zenon nods and adds that the creators of such tools are called magical engineers. After some walking, they enter Zenon's room, where Kuno finds a huge pile of his teacher's notes. He picks up some of the notes and instantly falls in love with the rich, magical knowledge contained within. Kunon asks Zenon for permission to live in his room, but Zenon tells him he'll get to use all of it without needing to live there anyway. He then picks up a box and gives it to Kunon, explaining that he's working on a magical tool that can prepare a cooked meal from the comfort of one's room. Zenon explains that although he's good at creating bigger shapes with his earth magic, the finer details of an advanced device are hard to perfect. Kunon wonders if he can create the softer parts with his water magic, so Zenon admits that he was planning on making him try it. He tells Kunon that he'll soon get to work with him on his prototypes, so Kunon feels excited for the future. Suddenly, Londamond bursts into the room to meet Kunon. Kunon respectfully returns the Grandmaster's greeting, after which Londamond asks if he would like to talk about magic together over lunch. Unfortunately for Londamond, Zenon is quite the jealous teacher, so he puts him to sleep with Kunon's waterbed. After that, Zenon goes back to discussing his magic tool with Kunon. A little while later, Kunon goes to the cafeteria to have some lunch during his break. While he chomps away at a sandwich, Victo asks him if he'd like to switch teachers. Kunon explains that although Zenon works him even harder than a slave, he is still an excellent teacher. While the other magicians get angry at this information, Kunon also tells them that his water magic synergizes well with Zenon's earth magic. He tries to praise his master even more, but Zenon stops him before he can make him the enemy of all the royal mages. However, Kunon thinks that Zenon is just a shy tsundere, so he suggests showing off their close relationship even more. Finally, Zenon explains that Kunon is endangering his teacher's safety by making the other teachers jealous, so he stops glazing him. Kunon then turns to Reisha and asks her about Mirika's whereabouts. Reisha explains that Mirika is at the orientation ceremony for senior students in the Royal Academy, so she cannot meet him for now. Kunon realizes that Mirika has already progressed to her higher studies. Londamond asks him what he plans to do in the future, so Kunon considers taking his graduation exam as well. Londamond clarifies that he was talking about the magic school, where all the noble sorcerers come for learning. He tells Kunon that the magic school holds great opportunities for him, and Zenon asks his student to consider it well before switching schools. Kunon nods and carefully wonders if he wants to continue in the normal academy or switch to the magic school. 2 years later, after a lot of magic training, Kunon stands up against Zenon for his entrance exam. He creates a water circle using his magic. Zenon responds by creating a cluster of earth spikes and sends them forward to attack. In response, Kunan uses a 55-layer compound spell that combines layers of bubble magic, which creates a tsunami that wipes out all of the incoming earth spikes. After Kunan successfully defends his attack, Zenon smiles and praises him for passing the test. Afterward, everyone heads into the mansion to have lunch. Mirka cooks some waffles in Zenon's new magic tool, surprised by how convenient it is. Kunan explains that Zenon's recent tool has been quite the hit in the country, but all of the earnings go directly to his master. He wonders why Zenon still refuses to pay him for his contributions, so Zenon acts like he already did him a huge favor by letting him work on such an amazing project for free. Then, Aiko offers to support Kunan's finances as his loving maid, so Kunan points out that his life sounds like a struggling actor's. Aiko gets into the play as well and wonders if Kunan will abandon her after making it big, so he insincerely promises to marry her one day. As Aiko points out how fake he sounded, Mirka laughs at their closeness, while Zenon feels weirded out. After lunch, Mirka wonders how many projects Kunan has completed with Zenon. Kunan explains that they've created 7 magic tools, written 5 research papers on magic theory, and also wrote a manual on magic experimentation. Then, Kunan reveals that they're working on yet another magic tool, but Zenon tells him that he'll handle all the work from now on. Kunan reminds him that they still need to finish the magic insect box first, but Zenon remains firm. He points out that Kunan is already turning 12, so it's time for him to attempt the exam for the Royal Magic School. Hearing this, Kunan goes silent before saying that he doesn't want to attend the magic school. Zenon wonders why, so Kunan explains that he can already learn the best magic from his beloved teacher. However, Zenon reminds him that he has already completed most of the projects he was working on. Kunan wonders if he's going to get abandoned after doing all of the dirty work, but Zenon points out that he simply cannot teach him how to advance his water magic since he's an earth magician himself. He also says that the magic school could have an incredibly talented water magic teacher, so Kunan shouldn't limit him to just staying with his teacher forever. As Zenon points out all the benefits of studying under a 3 or 4-star water magician, Kunan grows silent. He still tries to protest, but this time, he knows Zenon is right. Seeing him in pain, Mirka rushes to comfort Kunan. She also supports Kunan and encourages him to attend the magic school, saying that she'll do her best to become a woman worthy of being his wife. With Mirka's support, Kunan finally smiles and accepts Zenon's advice. After making his decision, he asks Zenon where the magic school is. When Zenon tells him that the school is 100 miles away from his house, Kunan almost changes his mind again, but luckily, his teacher kicks him out before he can turn back. Afterward, Zenon prepares to return to the tower, and Kunan asks him how he should prepare for his trip to the magic school. He wonders if he should prepare a whole bunch of extra clothes and bedding, but Zenon thinks he's got something much more useful. Kunan wonders if he's referring to his excellent sense of humor, but Zenon lets out a sigh and clarifies that he was actually talking about Kunan's noble goal of creating a new pair of eyes. With this final advice, he leaves in his carriage, leaving Kunan with a renewed motivation. Kunan rushes back into his room and immediately takes his pen out, wondering how he forgot the main reason why he started learning magic in the first place. He takes out a paper and begins writing on it, recalling how many things he has learnt to do without his eyes during his magic journey. Somewhere along the process, he got so used to living blind that he forgot his original desire to create a pair of eyes for himself. This time, he feels determined to see his original goal to the end. Meanwhile, in the carriage, Mirka starts bawling since she doesn't want to let Kunan go. Zenon taunts her for acting so tough when they were with Kunan, so she kicks him in the leg. Then, Mirka thinks about Kunan's goal to create a pair of eyes. If Kunan manages to achieve it, she thinks that he'll gain so much prestige that she'll be left forever behind as a mediocre wife. After thinking about it, she realizes that she wouldn't mind if Kunan remained blind forever. Mirka confesses her insecurities to Dario, admitting that she's a despicable person for thinking this way. Zenon shamelessly interjects and agrees with her, so she shuts him up with another kick. Dario also gets tired of Zenon's snarky remarks, so he warns him to tone it down. He then focuses on Mirka and tells her that she isn't a bad person for having selfish desires. However, he warns her not to give in to her selfish desires or completely sacrifice herself for someone else. Instead, he thinks she should find the middle path and do something that will satisfy both her and Kunan. He reassures Mirka that she'll be fine with all the training she has done, so she finally regains some confidence. Watching this, Zenon thinks that Dario is way too soft on Mirka. However, Dario thinks that Zenon is too harsh on Kunan instead, so Zenon reminds him about all the complicated magic theories and spells he has taught Kunan. Dario points out that none of those fancy spells can create new eyes, so Zenon admits that he doesn't know how to do that either. However, he thinks that Kunan has gained a new foundation of magic for him, and holds faith that his student can achieve the impossible. A few days later, Kunan performs some experiments to make new eyes. He creates reflective water bubbles that act like a mirror and multiples those bubbles in the thousands. Although Kunan knows that the eyes of other creatures act similarly to these bubbles, he doesn't feel them working for himself. He then tries a bunch of other bubble and reflective magic variations to see if something else works. After hours of hard work, he collapses on the floor with nothing but failed results. Exhausted, Kunan decides to unwind by taking a nice, hot sauna. He invites his older brother, Ixio, to join him. Ixio asks their dad to relax with them as well. Despite it being so late, both men happily agree to join Kunan. Arson goes a step further and invites Kunan's mom as well, so they all have a great time as a family. Seeing that Kunan is tired enough to take a sauna, Ixio wonders what kind of brutal experiments he was trying out. Kunan explains that he was trying his greatest experiment, so they realize that he's talking about his eyes. Arson wonders if he has made any progress, but Kunan admits that he's not even close to finishing them. Still, Ixio pats his shoulder and offers his full support, and Arson does the same for his precious son. The next day, as Kunan has lunch, he feels glad that all his friends and family are so supportive of him, wishing to see all their kind faces. He continues his learning at the Black Tower and at home. One day, Kunan creates a water mirror as a core, before covering it with a fine sand that can detect changes in the mirror's surroundings. With the sensory feedback from the fine sand, Kunan directs the information from the water mirror to flow into his mind. This time, with a working model, he opens his eyes, allowing him to see the world for the first time in his life. Realizing that he has achieved his life's goal, Kunan feels overjoyed and sheds tears of happiness. He walks towards his window to look at the outside world. However, he finds something strange in the window's reflection, so he turns around to look at it. Behind him, Kunan finds a massive shelled creature towering over him like a prehistoric giant. That was episode 6. Subscribe to not miss the next part and watch the next video on screen.